Welcome to Om on the Range, where we share the practice of meditation, the wisdom of Western Buddhism, and the refuge of our community. Whether you are new to meditation or a longtime practitioner, committed or curious, this offering is here to share solutions, stories, and support. Happiness and better health are available to everyone. It just takes practice. This is Om on the Range. Hello and welcome to Om on the Range. This is episode number 34, and my name is Whit. I'll be your co-host. This week we have Beth Sarver joining us as co-host as well. Beth is a longtime member of the TBC community. She is a leader in a multitude of roles that I'm really excited to get into because she's always helping and always planning and always making something happen. So Beth, welcome to the show. So as I said, you've been kind of a leader for quite a while here at TBC. I think first off, do you want to just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
So currently I am the youth leader at Temple Buddhist Center, and I've been in that role for several years now. Started just after COVID, so it's kind of a blur. But yeah, I am also a special education teacher, high school teacher, and I just love my work so much. I used to be an art teacher, so I embed art into everything that I do and teach, whether that's like our Sunday meditation with the children or science and math, English language arts with my students. So I try to bring mindfulness as well to everything. So my students start every day with a 20-minute mindfulness lesson, practices, and I embed the teachings of the Buddha.
So let's start there though. What first drew you to Buddhism?
Well, so I was raised in a Christian home, and I went through this period of time I like to call the Great Depression of 97. And I basically was really trying to come to terms with my spiritual life, but also kind of this feeling of not having the right recipe. And so I began calling myself a follower of the teachings of Jesus Christ. And then that kind of opened my mind up to following the teachings of other spiritual leaders and teachers. And I read the book Ethics for a New Millennium by the Dalai Lama, like as I was getting through this depression. And it just answered so many of what I felt like was missing or questions I had about the way I was raised. And the ethical conduct piece was really powerful to me because it seemed like that's what my biggest, critique of the culture of Christianity that I had been raised in, not my family system necessarily, but just like the whole religion, was this missing piece about ethical conduct that I found really refreshing and really activated me in a way. I then just started reading everything I could by the Dalai Lama, and um, yeah, that was like the beginning of me pursuing a meditation practice, which unfortunately I didn't have any formal training in the beginning, and I really was hard on myself for not being able to meditate, which was a really unfortunate number of years of basically quitting and starting again and quitting and starting again. But eventually I got the message that
Right.
practice makes practice, and there's no real wrong way to do it except for not doing it.
Yeah, no, that's very well put. And so a couple of things. It sounds like to me like one of the things that really drew you to Buddhism was the practical piece of it, the fact that it was applicable in so many ways and in so many places that you were already kind of looking. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I feel like the roots of my spiritual practice are found in the compassionate teachings of Jesus. And those teachings were like really very present in Buddhism. And so I think what I found in Buddhism was a little bit more like focus on my personal practice as opposed to getting it right, not backsliding, which was a big thing as a teenager. They would talk to us a lot about not backsliding, not falling away from God, which could end up in hell. And as
Right.
somebody who struggled with depression for all of my teen years, it didn't feel like it was enough. And so having practice that aligned with being of service to others, which was another part of the good that I took away from the teachings of Jesus. So yeah, I guess the way you said it is true. Like living the life of practice appealed to me because I needed it to stay grounded and sane. And I don't think I was ever taught how to be grounded, you know? And so, like, being able to be in my body and not be triggered by the things that were rooted in my childhood trauma required mindfulness, required changing my relationship with my nervous system, which came over time through practice and meditative practices, and also some great therapy that was rooted in mindfulness. And so, yeah,
So
practical
what
application.
Right. Well, nobody has the same history, right? Everybody gets here a little bit differently, but find it interesting that, especially for Western Buddhists, which is always a big open term, but, a lot of us, we had some experience with Christianity and we saw some real value to it, but we also found it to be maybe lacking for whatever reason. I think that's always interesting. I think also a lot of us get to a point where we're trying to figure out who we are and how we want to be. And for some of us, that includes whether it's depression or whether it's episodes or problems with addiction. We all try to find our way. And it's almost like you experience and exhaust those things open to you. And when you finally find something, like you said, that appeals to the practical side, the last part of you, or the part of me anyway, that I was going to listen to was that part that just said, hey, let's just do this, a day at a time. And let's just do this with what we've got as opposed to trying to find stuff. Is that true for you as well, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what I remember being raised with as a young child, like the experience of the body was never a focal point of spiritual practice. It was very much head and heart, but not body. And I had body-based traumas as a young child. And so I never learned how to be in my body in a way that was grounded and really not judging my body. So to be invited to be really present to your body and the sensations and your breathing, and for it to just be what it is. And what it is to be seen and noticed and look for those patterns. And then through interplay, which is a mindfulness practice that I teach and I've taught at TBC, through interplay, we learn to cultivate the wisdom of the body by paying attention, by noticing the patterns, by recognizing that we have this internal authority based on paying attention. And yeah, that was another part of my journey that really dovetailed with Buddhism to support my daily life practice. I got to join together with practitioners from all over the world as an interplay leader, and actually got to room with one of Thich Nhat Hanh's editors and one of his nuns from Plum Village on a retreat. And it was just like everything is connected. And it was Buddhism that helped me reclaim my relationship with Jesus and all of the teachings of Jesus through his book, Living Buddha, Living Christ, which is just a wonderful book. I reread it every year or two because it's so powerful.
So, how does your meditation practice influence your creative process, you think? Where does that show up and how does that feel?
I think I'm a sculptor by training, so I have my bachelor's degree in sculpture. So I feel like the sensory experience of like moving material, moving clay or any material, right?
Mhm.
Like being really present to the sensory experience of that, especially in sculpting clay. I took a bust sculpting course a couple years ago. And just like the ability to really get the best out of your hands really
Yeah.
requires a level of presencing that is, if you're an overthinker, which many of us creatives are, we have lots of ideas, we're very visionary. But if you don't have a method, and for years I didn't really have a strong enough practice to really benefit my three-dimensional art making skills like I have cultivated over time. So just being able to have the presence in your hands and in your use of a tool to be able to take something from in here and have a strong enough relationship, attunement of eye and mind and hand, like all of that I feel is a direct connection to mindfulness.
Does it feel like when you create that it's kind of meditation in action?
Yeah, I feel like pretty much anything could be a meditation. I remember when I was pregnant with my son and I was washing dishes at a coffee shop, and it was my favorite thing to do because I wasn't having to deal with people. I could just go back and do dishes and just the water. And it felt like a meditation, and I just decided it was one. And no matter what was going on in my life, the stressors of my circumstance, like the water and the warmth and the dish and moving from a dish being here to here, cleaning it, like that whole thing, I was very intentional. And I did probably more slowly than my coworkers would have wanted. But brushing your teeth can be a meditation, walking the dog, anything that you bring that presence to, slow it down a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel as you practice that becomes more and more true. You first become aware, at least in my experience, you first become aware of how everything in life, like you said, is connected, and everything in life is offering up an opportunity to learn and to grow. Everything's a teacher, everyone's a teacher.
Yeah.
There's really no good or bad. I do find that there are times in my life where certain actions, no matter, there's that freedom that comes when you quit trying to overthink them and you're just there present with them. And I think that's tremendous. I just think, again, this is just my experience, that's one of those things that you develop as you go down the path. And certainly different people develop that at a different timeline. There's no, hey, it's day 100 and now you're this. But yeah, I was just curious with creating anything, but as an artist, I was just curious how that felt with your practice. And so, what's your practice look like now? Do you have a set sitting practice or?
I My morning sit is I have a daily morning sit. I wake up at about 4:30, sometimes even before my alarm goes off. And before I get out of bed, I begin just coming into awareness of that I'm awakening, for the day. Ever since I made the decision to really take the vow of refuge, I do repeat the prayer of refuge first thing in the morning. I have a prayer of the Dalai Lama that I recite. I sit for just a few minutes in the morning and then get on my day pretty quickly. I walk my dog every day, at least twice. So my walks are sacred time. If I can get out into nature for that, I do. And then I have a bedtime meditation that I do as well. I also teach meditation to children every day except for Saturdays. So I practice with them. My garden is also a meditation. I have a small permaculture food forest that I've been building for many years. So probably the one area where I need to bring more mindfulness is to my eating. I feel like being a busy person, I think that's an area where I want to reclaim. There was a time where I had more mindful eating than I have right now.
Yeah.
But I try
So
to bring the practice with me wherever I go.
Do you feel like there's a role, or what is the relationship between your practice and your pet?
One of the things I love about her is she is very much in the present moment. She's very tuned in
Hmm?
to her people. Um, she does downward dog repeatedly all day long, and I'm like, wow, I need to do that more. But she just is, you know, a real blessing. She's very well trained dog. She's the first dog I've ever had that I've done extensive training with. And I feel like having that deep of a relationship where I know that I'm her teacher and also that she is mine because she's taught me the importance of consistency and a routine. We got her right before COVID. She was just such a blessing through that time. And she's training to be a professional therapy dog. She used to come to Unity Temple with me every day when I was running the school there at the temple. I think keeping a simple routine, getting out into nature regularly. She's also a really fast runner, and it's really amazing to see another being experience complete joy in their ability to just exhaust themselves with their full potential. When I watch her run fast, it's just like, wow, she is just experiencing the full freedom that I think humans would really long to experience.
Yeah, I love the natural, just dogs being dogs. Just, being 100% themselves, whatever they are, and not really feeling shame or regret or being disappointed in how they are or what they are. I have three dogs. They are not trained, and so it's a bit of a circus. But I've had dogs and cats for as long as I practiced, and I've always been impressed and surprised at how they react when I practice. Even with three of them in the room, they will all settle down. I'm not going to try to tell you that they practice, but they pick up the vibe and they settle in and they seem to enjoy. I used to have a dog that would insist on sitting in my lap while I practiced. I was just curious how that played and how that felt because they relate so well to their people, like you said, but they also bring that touch of wildness, of nature, of true.
Yeah.
They're still truly what they are. And so it's kind of a bridge, kind of a go-between when you see how they are and how they seem to work so well in both worlds. So,
Yeah, I definitely am have animistic qualities to my spiritual practice, and I look at Leia. Her name is Princess Leia of Galileo. I consider her a familiar, like this entity that's here to teach me, and I think the discipline part of her training has reminded me just of the gift that comes, the blessing of having a discipline that is also life-giving and not just like strict, but like, oh, this feels really nourishing. This feels really good to have fresh air coming into my lungs and walking on a narrow path through a forest and witnessing another animal enjoy that in their own way by running as fast as they possibly can. She's a blessing every day.
yeah, yeah. Are there teachings or insights that have been most transformative for you? Are there certain moments or certain, I mean, I know that's a loaded question and I know it also
Yeah.
changes, but being put on the spot with a limited amount of time, how would you answer that?
Yeah, I think the teaching that I am holding really close in the past year has been everything is change
Mm.
and the rising and falling, you know, living and dying. It's just all happening, you know?
Right.
And I think I'm also an environmentalist. And so I'm in some ways maybe too informed about what's happening in the world in as it relates to the earth and earth systems. And so the practice of grieving feels much easier with holding that truth, that everything is change. And I feel that we are in a time where we must grieve. And I feel that the Buddhist perspective on living and dying is a powerful force for staying engaged in this life.
Wow. I appreciate the way you pulled that together. And I don't know whether to smile or cry, but I do appreciate where you got with that.
Both.
Yeah, yeah, both. That would be the
Oh,
Buddhist way, right? So you're a teacher. You're a teacher 6 days a week anyway, maybe seven if the duty
I
calls.
count
But
my family.
so how is it teaching and sharing meditation with students, and why is that important?
When I was in my late 20s, I learned about my brain for the first time in a way that connected it to a practice. I think that's another part of why the Dalai Lama was so powerful in my life, is because he really connected with science, and I did as well.
Hmm.
And as an artist too, experiential learning is so important, like hands-on, getting in it, right? Having experienced pretty significant depression starting in my early teens and potentially my whole existence, when I learned about the brain and the impact of meditation on the brain, and the fact that I was not taught about my brain in any meaningful way as a child,
Yeah,
once I really began to study trauma and resilience and the power and purpose of healing the brain, I knew that mindfulness and paying attention were an essential part of living a good life, and it wasn't being taught. So I began inserting brain education into everything and the practices of cultivating the capacity to self-regulate and to really be able to not get carried away by your
right,
experience, by your emotions. And it's just really like a life skill. Early in my career, I did a lot of work with kids in juvenile detention centers and group homes and with trauma and all kinds of stuff. Learning for myself how my brain developed through my trauma really gave me this like sense of an aha, like what if we taught kids about their brain early? And so I love that. I love teaching kids about the amygdala and hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex and how mindfulness changes the brain and the body systems. I love hearing kids identify their emotions and their thought patterns and, just their own wisdom that they've cultivated. So it's interesting teaching like in a secular context as well as in a Buddhist context. Um, at the temple, I am always just blown away by the sharing that the 8 to 12-year-olds have about any given topic in regard to the wild questions that I ask them. And we always have such a great discussion. So I think it's important because the ability to be present to what's actually happening in the world is going to get increasingly harder. Mindfulness is, I think, an essential practice to mental health and coping with the stressors of life on this planet,
right,
especially for kids with disabilities. I moved away from just being an art teacher to being a special education teacher because I really wanted to teach life skills and because I really wanted to embed mindfulness into everything, into science and English and math and life skills, all of it, right? So I feel that it's a foundational practice that can help anybody live a more full and joyful life, even during the collapse of the bug population and potential new world wars and food security issues and all of the things, all of the storms that are happening around us. To be able to be with the storm that's in you, to be able to recognize it and understand it, that begins with noticing and paying attention and being able to be in your body. So I feel like it's like the most important thing.
So we're just about out of time, but if someone listening is curious about meditation or mindfulness, but they're unsure where to start, what would you suggest, or how would you advise them to maybe start this journey?
Well, I'm a big reader, but I think before even reading a book, recognize that there are things in your life that you're already doing that you could bring mindfulness to just by paying attention, like the sensation of your toothbrush with the toothpaste on your teeth, the experience of like the movement and the development of the frothing, just like being fully present to something that you're already doing, slowing down while eating a meal or drinking a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and just being fully with that experience, savoring that experience. I think a sensory rich practice is a good first on ramp. And then come visit us at Temple Buddhist Center.
That was a great plug to end the whole thing. Thank you very much for co-hosting. It's been tremendous to hear a little bit about how you got here, and I thank you for being so candid and for sharing your wisdom. So thank you for that. And I thank all of our listeners for joining us here for episode number 34 of On the Range. You can find us on Spotify as well as Amazon and also on YouTube. So feel free to go out and follow us and get caught up on some episodes. If you want to send us a question or a comment, we can be found at omontherange@gmail.com. For everyone here at Om on the Range, this is Whit signing off and wishing you happy trails. Thanks to our Om on the Range production team for making this program possible, and to Mr. Brad Athey for composing and performing the original music. And to you, our listeners, thank you for being a part of this journey as we explore meditation, Western Buddhism, and the path towards a happier, healthier life. Remember, less suffering and more joy are available to everyone. It just takes practice. Until next time, stay grounded, stay kind, and keep finding peace in the simple, practical things. For all of us here at Om on the Range, happy trails.